In this video, we're going to be making our first generative portrait. We're going to be making portraits around the concept called Pointillism. It's a technique of painting in which small distinct dots of colors are applied in patterns to form an image. Now let's see how we can make our computer do that. So first, to start off, we need a picture for which we're going to be creating a portrait. So once again, we're going to be using the cat pictures right now, but you can also feel free to load an image of your own choice. I'm going to go ahead and create a variable called cat image and set up function preload. And within this, we're going to say cat image equals load image from place kitten. Remember, you can get any size you want, but we're just sticking to 400. And what we'll do is let's just display the image to make sure it's been loaded properly. So we'll say image, cat image 0, 0. Now for generative portraits, make sure that the size of the canvas and the size of the image are the same. If let's say you want to make your image smaller, then you can do it in many different softwares, and we've listed one or two below. Okay, so our image is showing. Awesome. Now what we want to do to get something that looks like pointillism is we want to pick up random points in the image and make dots over there. And these dots that we make, or little ellipses that we draw, should be of the same color as the random point that we pick. Okay, so step 1 is to pick a random point, and step 2 is to assign the color of the image to that point. So first, let's just look at how we can pick a random point and draw an ellipse over there. So to do this, I'm going to create two variables, x and y. And within draw, I'm just going to say x equals random. So we want a random value that is between 0 and the width of the canvas or the image. And in our case, both are the same. So I'm just going to say 0, width, and y equals random 0, height. And what we'll do is we will create an ellipse in this random point x, y of size 20, 20 to start off with. Okay, so we have random ellipses appearing everywhere, but unfortunately we are only able to see only one at a time. So let's take the background in the image and move it to setup. Perfect. So step 1 is complete. We are now able to create random points across the canvas. Step 2 is to make sure that these points have the same color as the image below. So to do that, we need to use the .get function. Now we already have the x and y positions from these two lines, so we can go ahead and create another variable called color, and we can say color equals cat image .get x, y. Okay, and we will use this color as the fill. So fill color. Perfect. So now the ellipses are the same color as the image below. What we can do is we can also remove the stroke of the ellipse and maybe make them a little bit smaller. Perfect. So we can see them appearing, but the problem is we still have this image. So let's remove the image as well. And there, our generative portrait has started appearing. Just to make it look a bit more magical, let's make the background white. Perfect. So you can see that the image is loading, but it's very slow. If we want this to be faster, we can go ahead and make the ellipse 20, 20, and we'll see the image loading faster. But the problem is now it will be blurry. So what we can do to increase speed is add a for loop inside the draw loop. Now we know that the draw loop runs 60 times per second. If we add a for loop within that, let's say which runs 10 times, then each time it goes into the draw loop, this code will get run 10 additional times. So we can essentially create a loop over here. Let's create a variable I and run I as a counter from 0 to 10. and everything that is inside the draw loop will get put into this. So now you'll see that it runs faster. There. And because it's faster, we can even put in smaller ellipse values so that we can actually have a more granular picture. And there we have it. We've essentially created pointillism. You can keep the strokes if you want, if you like that effect. At this point, it's really up to you to sort of play with it and see what you want to do. So let's look at a few other things that we can do with this. So far, we've only played around with the size of the ellipse and the stroke around it. So adding a stroke actually ends up giving it a very mosaic effect. But what if we change the color values? So if you remember, we can actually access the RGB values of this pixel. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's create 3 additional variables called R, G, and B. And what we'll do is we're going to assign the values from color into R, G, and B. So red was the first value, which means it's position 0 on the array. Then green will be position 1 and blue will be position 2. Now instead of saying fill color, we can also say fill R, G, and B, giving them as individual values instead of a unit. And this still looks the same, nothing has changed. But we can go ahead and say 255 minus R, 255 minus G, and 255 minus B. And let's see what we get. So what we're seeing over here is essentially a negative of the image. This looks somewhat similar to the negative of photographs that you used to see on analog cameras. So what we've managed to do is take this image, take the pixel information and manipulate it so that even the colors are different now. And this is not the only way we can manipulate it. We can even say R, B, and G instead of saying R, G, and B and see what happens. So because we're mixing up the order of the colors, our output also gets a completely different look. So we can also say something like, maybe we invert just the R and switch the B and the G. So we'll get a different color scheme now. This is actually a color scheme where it kind of looks devilish because the eyes turned red. But you can really go around and play with this now, right? You can change the colors and see what happens. So I'm going to stick to the negative for now, where I say 255 minus for all 3 values, R, G, and B. Oh, it's not in the right order, R, G, and B. So now that you have this, you can even change more things where you can randomly change the size of the ellipse, right? So instead of it always being 10, maybe you can pick a random number from 5 to 15, and that is the size of the ellipse. So now let's see how this looks. So yeah, we have a more interesting pattern being created. We can also add a 4th value, which basically affects the transparency of the pixel. So if we maybe make that 100, we have a different look happening now. So go ahead and play with pointillism and generative portraits using this, and try and use different images. You don't have to stick to this one of cats. Try and use different images and see what you get. And we're very excited to see what you make. Thank you.